Watch how we put a decorative edge on this counter using our patcher paste and coated it with our Stone Kit process in jet black and soft tan Leggari epoxy pigments and gold Leggari effects. Comment below on what you guys think of the decorative edge and if you would do this on your countertop. I'm Kyle, now let's get into it.
So Kyle got the patcher paste mixed up. Just like our previous decorative edge we did 20% of baking soda. The baking soda thickens up the patcher paste so it doesn't want to sag as easy. You can put it on thick. We also added 4% of our accelerator, epoxy accelerator. That's going to speed up the drying time of the patcher paste. Now, the huge benefit of the patcher paste for your edges versus like Bondo. Bondo smells really bad. It dries extremely quick. You have to mix small batches. It's just really pain to work with. We mixed up 1.5 gallons here, enough to do a 50 square foot kitchen. We don't want to leave it in the bucket. It will set up if it sits in the bucket too long. So what we do to minimize that is we get product on all the edges and then we go back and add the texture. So we use some sheetrock trays, mud trays, pour it into there, puttied on all our edges, and then we go back and fine tune the texture. That way we're not letting it sit in here too long. We don't want to just pull some out, do the edge, get it looking good, come back, grab some more. We want to get it out as fast as we can. So I'll have Kyle jump in here when we start, get out of the bucket as fast as we can, and then we go back and fine tune those edges. The next thing is the edge that's on here now. It was a more subtle edge. I'm going to show you how to make a really chunky, thick edge that has a lot of texture to it. So a lot of different techniques you can use, and maybe you guys can come up with your own as you're doing it. Maybe some plastic bags, maybe even your hands. A lot of options with this. I'll probably show you a couple simple techniques before we start, and then again I'm going to show you how to create a really textured edge that looks really cool when we have that glass smooth finished epoxy surface. Give a batch to Kyle, and then I'll kind of show you. So the edge here, you can kind of see it. We've sanded it down, we've coated it. So we're just going to be going over this, but again, we're just trying to get it on here real quick. So that's what Kyle's going to do while I'm kind of messing with this. Try to minimize the drips, scrape the bottom, put it back up there. As long as your plastic's clean, we can scoop that up off the floor, reuse it. But I like to kind of get an even thickness. And so for that first edge that we did, once I had it on here, all I did was just pull it different directions, and it would create some lows, some highs, right? Just all different directions. That's how we did that first edge. Once you sand it, it looks really cool. But again, once the resin flows over, it'll fill it in a little. It won't be as textured. Another edge that Tim did on his overlaid desk was really cool. He kind of did a bunch of these kind of subtle lines like this. You can go different directions, right? Really cool looking edge. Real simple and fast. It's cool because we can go back and fine tune spots. But you're just kind of creating lumps and textures, right? So that's one. It's pretty textured. And then obviously we would sand that a tad bit. Resin would flow over, it would fill it in a little bit, but you'd still have a decent amount of texture on it. And then if you're looking for some real fast, simple depth to it, you just pop the surface. And you'll just want to pull it kind of up towards you, down. You're just popping that surface. You can see all these peaks it's creating. And so when we sand that, we'll still have a lot of texture, even when the resin flows through it. Trick is to just hold the trowel flat and just try to get different pulls coming off. Like I said, maybe pull a couple up, swipes if you need to add more in a spot. But this is a real heavy textured edge, which looks really cool once you sand it and coat it. All right guys, so we're gonna go around, get it all on here, and then we're gonna just start popping that edge with the trowel. Again, the biggest thing is we wanna kind of get an even, right? We have barely any here, it's real thick there. Take a second, even it all out best you can. And we'll also try to get some right on the top edge as well. So when I scrape the bottom edge, you can see it pulls it one way. So I want to go one way, come back the other way, just so that it doesn't pull it all in one direction. This will help minimize as much sanding that will need to be done. Once you get the majority of it done, you can kind of go around and fine tune any spots, maybe add a little, maybe it's too thick in some spots. You want to try to get that texture, the thickness and chunkiness of it kind of even all throughout. These are all kind of going different directions. That's what we're looking for. And then when we sand these down, we'll flatten some of these big peaks out. Some of these won't get hit a lot. It just gives it a really cool look. We're getting ready to prime, but before we prime, I want to show you how cool this edge turned out once it's sanded. Has a lot of texture to it. Let me know in the comments below which one you guys liked out of the three that I showed you before we started. We did the skip trial, we did the texture that you're looking at now, super thick texture, and then we also showed you how to do like a wave texture. It's really cool too, but I'm real curious what you guys like best for those edges. And then if everyone likes that wave texture, we'll probably wind up doing a video on that as well.
All right guys, it's mixing time. We're gonna be mixing up a 3-gallon kit with a 50-50 mixture of our jet black epoxy pigment and our soft tan epoxy pigment. And then we're also gonna be using our gold Leggari effects. You guys will probably be receiving these bottles in a little smaller of a size. All right guys, and you can see that our jugs have handles. So a lot of the resin tends to get stuck down here in the handles while it's draining out. So we like to tip them back for about 30 seconds, let all that resin drain out of those handles, and then continue pouring. Alrighty guys, now that we got our resin mixed up, we need to split it into 2 equal batches. So we're gonna grab another new bucket. We'll just eyeball this as close as we can to half. Alrighty, now that we have our resin split up, we're gonna add our epoxy pigments. All right, the next step, now that our epoxy is all mixed up and pigmented, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna make our dirty pour batches. There's really no rhyme or reason to how you layer these in, just however you see fit. Remember, we're also gonna be using our gold Leggari effects, so we'll be adding those in periodically as well. Now that our dirty pour batches are all made up, we just want to get them over to the counter and get them dumped out as fast as possible so that they don't heat up and flash off and become unusable. We're going to be using our weather stripping as a dam because we have the crushed edge on here. The tape won't seal to that. It'll just leak out and everything. So we like to use the weather stripping when you have an edge like this. Just really keeps all the resin up on the countertop until you're ready to pull it. And then another thing you can do is use a roller like Tyler is here to make sure we get a good seal on that weather stripping, where you can just press it down with your hands. And then another thing we can do with the weather stripping is just put a small piece across the corner just to hold those two ends together.
So the next step after mixing is obviously dumping out the product. Now the biggest thing, guys, is make sure you get the buckets dumped out as fast as you can. We don't want those sitting in there longer than they have to. Another tip is cooling the resin down by setting it in cold water. That'll give you more working time as it's sitting in the bucket. A few things you want to make sure you have done before you start is obviously have your weather stripping down. If you guys want to draw a pattern that you can simply follow, you can use for the black primer. Obviously a Sharpie won't show up as well, so you can just use a paint stick and you can just kind of etch that primer, and that'll give you lines to follow. Makes it really simple if you're trying to mimic a certain pattern. So what we're going to do is Kyle's going to be dumping it out. I'm going to talk through the process so we can explain as much as we can on this countertop. Now obviously we have this decorative edge. That's why we're using weather stripping. We don't want any blowouts or bleed marks from just trying to tape on that face. Weather stripping works really, really well. We've never had blowouts with that. It also sticks extremely well to the primers. Stone kits are the easiest kits we have to install because we're simply dumping out of a bucket. There's no artistic touch needed. It's gonna do some natural veining, marbling, all that cool stuff all on its own. So that's why these are such a big hit. We'll get started here. Kyle's gonna just dump these out randomly. Biggest thing you want to make sure is when you're dumping out, you're not dumping too big of piles in one area, and we want to make sure we have epoxy all throughout the kitchen. He doesn't want to just dump out 2 or 3 buckets on the island and then only have 1 bucket for the rest of the counter. Look at all the natural veining that we get just from this process. And that's exactly what I was talking about, how simple these countertops are to make look like natural stone. Also notice, guys, he's not pouring right next to a big fat bead. He's leaving gaps because look at that, that's just flowing out and separating. This pile is gonna get even bigger. So he's always trying to fill in the larger gaps. Look at the natural cells. We haven't even dispersed this at all. We got these really cool veins throughout here. That's the type of look you get with these kits. Very, very unique.
All right guys, we're gonna try to get some more gold out here. So we're just gonna be adding some of our gold effects right to the top so that they stay right on the surface.
These effects are cool because if you add too much, we can kind of blend it in to let it disappear a little bit. Obviously, if you want to add more, we just pour some more on the top.
So now we're just gonna go back and fine tune this. We're just gonna look for any big open spots, just try to fill those in while the rest of the resin is leveling out.
So while Kyle's finishing up, filling in all these bigger areas, I can go around and start filling in these little teeny gaps that are missing with my finger. All we're trying to do is just get rid of surface tension. I can even fill in big spots like that if I want. There's so much resin out here, it'll level out. But we want to make sure we use all the resin we have. So I'm just going to focus on the smaller ones while he's getting all the big open areas filled in. And then just make sure you're following the pattern. I don't want to go this way across like a vein there. I want to just follow that pattern. And two, guys, if there's spots where maybe you want to blend more, we can really manipulate this however we want. Like maybe right here, I want to get rid of that. I can just run my finger along that, try to get rid of that lumpiness that it had, create more of a natural vein. There's just lots of option with these kits.
All right, the next step, we're gonna be spraying the entire surface with isopropyl alcohol, 91% or higher, which gives us our dispersing effect. And we're looking for small to medium drops covering the entire surface.
So you'll see when that stuff hits where the effects are, where two colors are kind of blended, it really creates that dispersing effect in those cells. All through there, created all those cells. And watch when he sprays right here what it'll do. Just really brings out that natural stone look. And you don't have to spray your whole top. If you want to just do these cells in random spots, you could spray random patterns. You could follow a vein with your spray, or you can spray the whole top like we are right here. So Kyle added the gold effects when he was doing the dirty pour batches. We decided to add gold into the top of those batches and dump them out, and that's what created these really gold colored veins, right, that really pop. Let me know in the comments if you guys like that look or if you'd rather not have that in there. That'd be really, really cool. I think it turned out great. I think it actually made these countertops all this gold in there. But I'm always curious what you guys think as you're watching. So let us know below. The next thing I'm gonna show is how to do fracture veins, like really tight fracture veins. If you wanna do those, you wanna do that after you spritz it with isopropyl alcohol, because what'll happen is you'll do a fracture vein and you spritz it, it starts to disperse that surface and it'll push those veins apart. So you wanna do that after you do that. If you guys spray denatured on top of that, that's fine because you're misting it. So again, if you're gonna do fracture veins, spritz it with the isopropyl if you are first, and then do your fracture veins. So I'll just run a fracture vein right on the edge of this vein right here. This is really, really cool. So what we do is you take a tongue depressor that's thin, and I start on the top, get a little on there. What's going to happen is that's going to continuously drip down. And then I just run that along whatever vein I want to follow. And now we have this really natural looking small vein. Really, really cool to add accents on your tops. Maybe I'll do one where it's really dark. Maybe we'll just run one right here. So yeah, that's pretty much done. I think we've hit everything we wanted to on this. Last thing Kyle's gonna do is mist the surface with Denatured. What that's gonna do is get rid of all these micro bubbles. It's gonna let the bubbles in the resin come to the surface and pop a lot easier. And if you hit it twice, the biggest thing is you don't wanna flood the surface. If you put too much on the surface, it can muddy out the colors. It can muddy out the veins that we have. So if you wanna do it 2 times or 3 times, maybe you have bubbles that aren't popping, let that denatured evaporate before you spray it again. So we'll hit it once, we'll let it evaporate 5-10 minutes. If we think we need to hit it again, we'll mist it again. But again, don't flood it, over flood it, because that'll muddy out those colors. We did black, soft tan, and gold. The soft tan, when you pair it with like a dark color like black, it almost looks white, but this is not white. If you added like a white sheet of paper, this would be more of a tan color. So it's pretty cool when you put that with the black. So we'll let this evaporate. We'll probably hit it one more time with Denatured Alcohol. And then for testing for the edges, typically when we're doing our taped edges, we'll fold that back. Since we're doing weather stripping, we're just looking for the resin to be really set up, right? See how runny it is? If I just get some, it's really runny. Test it in the corner, because obviously that's going to flow off anyways. So we want to let it get a little bit set up more before we pull the weather stripping. And keep in mind, we have some thick edges here that we have to coat. Typical counters are like 1.5 inches. They're a lot skinnier. You could let it set up longer, but we'll probably have to pull this sooner because we want this to flow over enough to coat this thick of an edge. So we're ready to pull the weather stripping, guys. If you remember before, right when we were done, you can see how stringy it is now. And just remember, we're trying to coat some really thick, tall faces. So this is a good time to pull this. So what we're gonna do is start pulling these. We're gonna let it start dripping down the edge, and then we're gonna brush in this whole edge. So the trick when you pull this to get it all the way to the edge is to pull it down at an angle. If I just pull it straight up, see how it leaves that gap? We have to come back and kind of get rid of that surface tension there. So if we do this, it just brings that resin right to the edge, and that helps it flow over easier. So once I pull that weather stripping, I'm just going to make sure it's all to that edge so it can start flowing down. And then we'll just let it drip for a little bit. And then the trick is to just kind of rub it in all the crevices. Leggari tip for you guys: if you have blowouts, the easiest way to address those, and this can work also if you're taping your edges, just set a paint stick in there. If you have to hold it up somehow, you can tape it up to the wall, whatever. But once that paint stick hits the resin there, it kind of creates a dam and doesn't let it flow out anymore. So a simple way to fix any spots that maybe blew out, didn't get pushed down good enough. And then we'll just remove that. And so you definitely want to let it drip a little bit. If you try to rub it when there's not much there, it's just gonna take forever. So we wanna get a little bit of drips, that way we have resin to push around and just get in all the low spots. Don't worry about messing up the design, it's still gonna flow over. So last thing, guys, is obviously we want to kind of babysit these edges. I can see some spots where I can still see primer. Obviously doing a real textured edge like this, you're gonna have to really work it into there really good, but it does look cool once it's done. But we want to make sure I don't have, you know, runs and stuff like this. So I want to make sure it's kind of flowing over. So I'll babysit this, move stuff as I need to, blend some of these things in as I need to. And then once you're satisfied with the edges, we take a putty knife and we just scrape our drips. Run this on the bottom. That'll get rid of the drip so we don't have to sand those later on. It'll still drip for another hour or two. And then if you guys have any spots, corners that are thin, always check your outside corners. If they're thin, you can get the same color in that area and just drip it down on the top, and that'll help fill out your outside corners if you have any thin spots there.